Yeah.
Jim, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out for the program today.
Oh, Joe, I really appreciate being here. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So I want to get into your line of work. I think it's fascinating. It's such a human-centric kind of thing, and I think we've all, because we lived through this pandemic, we all realized how important it is to have human beings around us. Because
Yeah.
if this would have happened in the '80s, we would have not been connected. I can't even imagine what it would have been like. But even though we were so connected, we knew that we had to have that human touch. So my question to you is, how much of a more hyper focus on your business model did you register into because of living through this pandemic?
It's funny. I was just on another program where we were talking about BC, right before COVID.
Yeah.
And I'm a hugs and handshakes guy. I mean, there's no substitution for us being in the room together. And the work that we do is, I have to be honest, is it's much more effective when we're in the same space. But having said that, this technology really blossomed, and like you said, we're able to connect, at least start connections and meet people, our message all over the world, and that might not have been possible without this type of technology. So, yeah, I've got kind of a love-hate relationship with the whole
Yeah.
thing. But ultimately, it is about connecting with people on a deeply human level. Connecting with, I try to distinguish between, for instance, inspiration and motivation, meaning we have to connect with people's hearts, not just their heads, in
Yeah.
order to really have a meaningful relationship that's gonna help us accomplish our goals, if that's what we're talking about.
Well, it's kind of like that quote. It's about when you leave the room, how you make somebody feel. You got to really kind of
Mhm.
seep into their bones and give them that good feeling, and that happens most of the time on a very human level when you meet somebody. So, um,
Yeah, what's the point otherwise, And unfortunately, some of this technology that's meant to help us, kind of connect across the void, if you will, can backlash too. I mean, look at the outbreak of just horrendous messaging over the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO.
yeah.
People that express things that they normally wouldn't face to face, right? But behind the shield of whatever platform you're on, that it's easier to dehumanize people, and that's something we have to be very cautious about, especially as this technology is moving forward.
But the thing about our generation is that we see that bridge to an old world where we had, journalists. I remember one time listening to there was a morning correspondent named Carl Castle, and he was on NPR and he retired. And this was probably about 2018, 19. And the reporter asked him on his last morning, what was the most important thing that you adhered to as a journalist? And he said, I
Mm.
never, ever went on without having two verifiable sources. And we've gotten to a point
Mm.
now where news agencies and the media are getting stripped away. And we have social media as our new news outlet. So you get these people that are making comments that aren't trained, that have no business throwing out things into the ether that are negative or even short-sighted without having the right information. And now everybody, the younger generations, are getting infiltrated with all of this stuff that's not corroborated, not factual, not logical, not kind. And it's bizarre.
Mhm. You know, I can't help but think about my mom. She was a very wise person. There's a person who didn't graduate high school. Her dad died early, and she had to quit to go to work. But she's one of the most brilliant educated, was one of the most brilliant educated people I've ever met. Self-educated. She used to say it all the time. You have the right to say anything you want. It doesn't mean you should,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a mark of civility, I think. And again, it's not. I'm not a pessimist. I don't think it's lost.
Yeah.
But I think discussions like this need to happen so that we do return to it. We preserve what's there and hopefully expand it, because especially as AI is presenting an incredible amount of challenges and opportunities, especially in the leadership space, it's something we're going to have to be very aware of. What are we going to do with people? How are we going to treat people when this technology disrupts us? And it's going to.
Yeah, and we've seen minor disruptions now that are starting to happen, minor anomalies. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's really good. I think about, the greatest generation, the baby boomers, the World War II vets.
Mhm.
There was a bedside manner, there was a civility, there was this grit
Yeah,
that really kind of kept everything in tow. There was kind of a glue. And I think that our generations have to retain that glue. We have to
yeah.
pass down that torch to keep that integrity moving forward.
We're wired to be together, aren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, human beings evolved as a social species. If we're going to argue that we became the dominant species on the planet, I suppose some people could make the argument the other way too, right?
Yeah.
But if that's the case, I mean, we evolved to work cooperatively and now that's not to dismiss the reality of tribalism. That happens. That's part of our wiring as well.
Yeah.
And that's part of, that's part of the challenge that we work on with leaders. How do we bridge that gap? Because especially here in our society, right? Even a small organization works with a tremendously diverse group of people.
Yeah.
And, how do we to me, diversity doesn't make us stronger. I hate when people say that. Our ability to appreciate diversity and to be able to work together and cooperate in spite of our differences, that's what can make us stronger, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't always, but it should, it can.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily
Sure.
basis. On paper, you're a leadership activist, you're an author, you're a speaker, you're a founder, you're all these things. But if I put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders, let's say, it's career day, and one of the kids wants to know, what do you do for a living? What's your answer?
It's funny because you just triggered this memory I have. On some of my web materials, there's a picture of me when I was still running my martial arts centers. And it's with a group of we call them our little dragons, 3 to 6 year old kids, right? They were the best. In fact, my black belts sometimes when they run into me, they say, "Hey Jim, do you miss us, Sensei? You miss us?" I say, hell no, I miss the little guys.
Yeah.
I miss my little dragons. And what you just talked about strikes at the heart of an exercise. As much as I insist on leaders doing something every year on a regular basis, I almost demand this, that we sit down, take a day of reflection and ask ourselves, who am I? What do I do?
Yeah.
And that strikes at the heart of what you just asked me. And for years now, what's come back to me is teacher. That certainly was my life as a sensei. That's certainly my life as a leadership activist. Now how I get to express that's kind of cool these days. You touched on the technology. We get to do a lot of things online. I like to be in the room speaking, doing workshops, retreats, things like that. It really is my passion. But teacher.
Yeah. So what did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream of growing up and becoming?
In third grade?
Yeah.
Wow.
Time machine.
You got me, man. That's the deepest question I think I've been asked on a podcast in a while. Third grade, I have no idea. It might have been firefighter, and I actually pulled that one off when I was young, so I lived that one. Yeah, I think that was it. I'm not sure.
Well,
I'm almost 65 now, so that was a little while ago.
I get it. Yeah, no, and I sometimes think too, what did I really want to be? And the only thing I can grab onto before I got serious when I got older
Yeah,
was wanting to be a cop. I wanted to ride around with poncho
yeah,
on chips, right?
yeah.
You
Right?
know, and in the California sunshine with the
Yeah,
shades and doing that thing. So,
yeah.
so let's
Well, I can tell you what it wasn't. It
right.
certainly wasn't this. This came about completely by accident. It was a really great accident, but this is all accidental. So I really appreciate where I am now.
So let's find out how we got here. So what were some of the foundational elements, the
Mhm.
seeds that were planted into you that grew into you becoming a leadership consultant and doing all of these diversified things that you're doing with your life? I mean, and where were you born and raised? How did all of that happen?
I was born in a town called Willimantic, Connecticut, which I have very, vague memories of.
Yeah.
We left there when I was young. We moved around a lot when I was young. But the pivot point actually came in I'd have to say in my 20s. I was going through a pretty heavy drug experience. I was a full-time musician at that point.
Yeah.
And that's not the reason I got into drugs, but it certainly made the drugs very available. There were a lot of other issues. Most of us who were addicts, we just don't fall into it, out of a void.
Yeah.
There were issues I was obviously trying to medicate myself for. And the drugs were very available in the 1980s. It was almost hard to avoid them in that environment. So I got hooked pretty bad and missed probably almost 3 years of my life. And still I'm paying for it still today. Okay, there are a lot of opportunities that I missed. But anyway, I used to think that was a pretty bad resume for somebody working in leadership. I came to realize it was a very big one, and part of it was the transformation process. In order to survive, and believe me, by rights I should be dead or in jail many times over, but at some point I recognized that I needed to make a change. And so I learned a lot about the process of transformation. I had to transform myself, obviously, from a loser to a leader, if you want to say it that way, to, from a drug addict and a dropout to a black belt, and then later to sensei. And that was really the pivotal moment in my life. I mean, that practice saved my life. And like I said, a series of accidents. People started asking me about you know, about that process of transformation, about the philosophy that I learned in martial arts, which is really a process of discovering yourself. One of the most remarkable masters I ever got to study with, he actually defined the attainment of a black belt as a good learning attitude. He said, you get your black belt, you'll learn how to learn, mostly about yourself. And then you go and apply that in different areas of your life. So again, lots of different currents and eddies that brought it to this, eventually started to be asked to go out and talk about these things. And that led to the opportunity to be able to travel all over the world and share these ideas. So I'm very blessed to be here and to be talking with you today. Yeah.
So I want to take a slight pivot here as a musician and obviously a music
Yeah.
lover. What was the first big show that you saw that made you think, I want to do that one day? I want to be a rock star.
I was just talking to a friend of mine about that. One of my dear friends from back in school, and she's still a sister by choice today. And she and her boyfriend took me to see Linda Ronstadt. That was the first
Wow.
big show that I went to.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Livingston Taylor opened for her. He got hit by a frisbee. Later on, I had the opportunity to work with Mr. Taylor
Yeah.
and understood why he got hit by the frisbee. But anyway, it was a great moment. And then I remember back in the day, we had handwritten driver's license as our first issue, right?
Yeah.
So we were able to take a Sharpie and change it. So I changed mine a couple, well, about 18 months so that I could get into bars and roadie for bands. And eventually I said, hey, you know what? That guy playing drums, I think I could do that too. And one thing led to another, and here we are. And I'm still at it as, for fun.
That's
Don't
awesome.
have to do it as a business anymore. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's great. So who's been a hero for you? Who's been that inspiration that helped you get out of that tough spot that you were in with drugs and to
yeah.
help you get to this point where you have this focus of leadership and to help people get to where they need to be in life?
There are really too many even to talk about in a short conversation, but two that really stand out. One was my guidance counselor in high school. We remained and became lifelong friends. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. He was exposed to Agent Orange while he was serving in Vietnam, and that led to an early death.
Yeah.
And but he was a person, and here's why he is my hero. Even in the darkest days of that, he was a person who stood by me and believed that I could change, that I could transform. And those are the real heroes in your life, right? The people who are there when it's easy to support you when things are going good.
Yeah.
You want the people around, when the poop's hitting the fan. And the other one, I mentioned, give a nod to Dr. Yang Zhuang Ming, who was one of the masters I studied with. If people are familiar with martial arts, particularly Tai Chi and Chin world, they'll know his name. He's one of the greatest in the world, but one of the most humble and just one of the most sincere and authentic human beings I've ever met. And I think one of our greatest living philosophers. And he's one that helped me look over the horizon a little bit and help
Yeah.
me keep things in perspective. So yeah, and we need those people too. So you need the people that are going to boost you up, even when you're not feeling good about yourself, and you need the people that are going to help you look over the horizon, keep the humility, right?
Yeah. It's funny, speaking of sensei and that level of like acumen, that higher
Mhm.
consciousness, I find that with jazz musicians. Like the higher up the food chain you
Mhm.
go, the more talented they are. They're grounded, they're
Yeah,
looking out for the youth, they're very into teaching the youth, and they just have this
yeah,
sense like when you get away from a conversation, you're like, wow, they are operating on a whole other level. I feel like they're like
yeah.
the Jedi's in Cloud City and Empire Strikes Back. They're just up there. They're watching all of us do our thing, and they have this heightened level of spirituality, emotionality, intelligence, but they don't flaunt it. They're very grounded, and there's something very human about that.
You hope not, right? It's funny
Right.
because unabashedly, I'm an old school rock and roll head, and
Yeah.
roots rock and roll, punk, and R&B and all that stuff. I have a lot of friends that are in the jazz world too, and you're right. And it's the same thing in martial arts. It's the same thing in leadership. I mean, I used to joke in martial arts. I said I met more great orange belts than I ever met great black belts.
Yeah.
And by that I mean that a lot of people can get arrogant early on in the process, right? And yet the people who really have meaningful achievement that have really worked for it tend to be the most humble. Well, in fact, I'll tell you a quick story. There was on my website, there's some pictures somewhere of me in my black belt. That's part of the reason I share my story of being a drug addict and whatnot, because when I got that black belt, that was the best day of my life. I mean,
Yeah.
it was the first time I've really been recognized for anything meaningful. They give you kind of a cheap belt at the test. So when I got back, my master had a gift for me. It was a heavyweight black belt. Beautiful, beautiful, most beautiful dark shade of black you ever saw. It was just incredible. But he said, if you stay in the arts, this is going to change over time. It's going to, you're going to get dragged across the floor and it's sweating and bleeding and crying at the whole thing. All those things certainly came true. But more important, over time, over the years, the black covering, it grays, that happens to the best of us, it frays and wears away.
Huh?
And underneath there's a white belt. And that's intentional because why? The white belt is what to a martial artist? The beginning, right?
Yeah.
So it reminds us every day, the further along we go, the more we have to be in tune with what we called in the arts beginner's mind, which is the mind of the true master. So you're certainly accomplishing things, learning, growing, that's what you want to do, but never quite satisfied. Always want to learn and grow more, and always maintain that humility of the beginner, the curiosity, the excitement, the enthusiasm, and the humility. So I think those are important imprints. We can all, and I don't know, I was going to say, leaders need, but to me, you're a leader. Anyone who's watching this, you're a leader, whether you recognize it or not, because you inspire people, you empower people, you guide people around you. That's what a leader does. It has nothing to do with rank or title
Yeah.
or position of authority.
Yeah.
Just once in a while, we hope that people have the spirit of sharing and sharing these qualities. It ends up in a management position. It's nice when it happens, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. In this
Yeah.
world of over information that we're in, I mean, we have so much
What are
information.
you trying to say?
Yeah, right, exactly. Where are you going with this?
Oh my
We
goodness.
we have all these conspiracies and all these things that are floating
Yeah.
around, but what we all
Right.
really need is leaders. And I'm going to give you an example of that. And I don't want to make this political, but I remember when I was a kid and the Challenger exploded in '86.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
will never forget that speech that Reagan gave, where he
Mhm.
was like the astronauts were going up to kiss the skies, and you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying. There was such
Yeah.
an eloquence, and there was a way when I was a kid that put me at ease because that was big, especially for
Mhm.
us because I was in junior high. We were going to watch Christy McAuliffe give her lesson in space. We were
Right,
ready
right,
for it.
right.
It was
Mhm.
just a big lesson of mortality. So my question to you is, right now in 2024, who is that embodiment of good leadership? Who's a leader out there that you admire that top down has the qualities that can do things like that?
Again, there are so many people. We tend to emphasize the folks that are the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
And they make better press, like you. When part of my adventures when I was young, I worked in media myself. I was working at a television station when the Challenger blew up.
Yeah.
I was on the audio board of a television control room when that happened. But you know, if it bleeds, it leads. That's the sad truth of things.
It
So we
is.
don't get to hear about the great leaders as much. And then there's a confusion too, where some people will rely too much on personality of expression. For example, let me use one to be a little bit provocative. Elon Musk is someone I find very interesting
Yeah.
from a leadership perspective.
Yeah.
Now, is he the most personable guy in the world? Maybe not. I don't know.
Right.
I've heard different stories about it, depending on, which of his circles you fit into.
Yeah.
And that's important too, because someone who leads a big organization like that, or like you said, political leaders who are ostensibly leading a society, you can't possibly be everything to everyone, right?
Yeah.
So at a certain point, it speaks to authenticity, it speaks to enthusiasm. Well, in fact, I'll define it this way. And it's not to dodge your question, but when I'm pressed to define leadership as succinctly as I can, I always kind of lean on this one. I say leadership is sharing. A leader shares. The rest of the conversation is about what we're willing to share and how. And like I said, that can happen at any level. I mean, I've met people who have absolutely no power, no authority, no title, who are tremendous leaders, who made a huge impact on my life and other people's lives. But it's interesting. So look for the people who share.
Yeah.
And because you're a music person, I'll say this: I got to work with Dolly Parton
Yeah.
only for one day. And I have to say, and you look at her expression, not just in music, but in her community and what she gives back and continues to give back. She's somebody that to this day I still admire as a tremendous leader. And she embodies that principle of sharing. I mean, she's every bit as authentic as you. There's not a fake bone in her body.
Yeah.
And you get that in the first 10 minutes meeting her. And So what she does and her place in the world, if we could be more like that, she's the type of leader we need. I don't care if it's politics or business or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the type of person we need. Yeah.
A good friend of mine who lives in Vegas now, he moved from Kansas City there. His wife has a like a shrine and altar to Dolly Parton. It's the coolest thing in the
Well,
world. There's like a Dolly candle, or and there's all these things. But she came to Kansas City recently because she has this Reading Across America program,
right.
and she went to a place called the Folly, which a lot of jazz musicians are at. Well, when she
Hmm.
came to town, they renamed it Dollywood, or the
Oh,
Dolly.
nice.
And
Yeah.
the executive director, I was asking about her, and he was like, she was amazing. She's not
Yeah.
that tall, but she comes in and she's a
Oh, no.
force. Like she
Yeah.
is like you can feel it emanates from her this
In
power
a
of
good way, in a very
in a
good
good
way, not
way.
an intimidating way. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And
So
I'm sure she loved that because we actually asked her about the Dolly impersonation contest, right?
yeah.
And, oh, she loves them.
Oh, I would imagine so. She
Yeah.
just has a
Yeah.
wonderful spirit, a wonderful heart. Just
Humble.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. We need
Yeah.
more of her on the planet, that's for sure.
Hmm.
Um, So I'm curious, as somebody that has to give a lot of yourself to help people in leadership modes, you also have to evolve as a human. What is that collective gumption for you every day to do all of this holistically to the best of your ability?
Well, there's where these challenges that I've had in my life become incredible blessings because from my mom as a great example, talk about a great leader, and through the martial arts experience, martial arts is not, it's not a glamorous experience. You walk in the dojo, that's not a place of success. That's a place of failure.
Yeah,
You know, you're constantly testing yourself and doing things that are a little bit beyond your current abilities, right? And so that's humbling in itself.
yeah,
So the experiences I had identifying, recognizing myself as a drug addict, that's not a comfortable thing to do. It
yeah,
was a horrible experience. I'm not proud of that, and I hate it when people glamorize escaping from that. I mean, that is the least I could do for the rest of my family and community is to not be a drug addict.
yeah,
Okay. But having said that, having been through that experience, I really appreciate that. Again, we're back to the humility. It's keeping that beginner's mind we talked about with the belt story.
yes.
So, that's something I do practice it, but there's there's a lot that's just wired into me. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to sit here. Well, I'll tell you, this became an exercise at our black belt tests. And to me, that was payday for me. I loved promoting people to black belt, especially people who didn't think they were going to make it. So after they tie on their belts and are all feeling good about themselves, I have to be a jerk, right? I say, okay, everybody raise your hands. Now reach down behind, pat yourself on the back. That's it. Now let's get back to work, right? And that's a practice that I always keep in mind.
Yeah,
I don't remember if Dr. Young shared this with me, but this became part of our ritual too when people were graduating. He said we would have a vessel of water and a bowl of rice. And it's an old saying, but it said, before I was enlightened, I carried my water, gathered my rice. Now that I'm enlightened, I carry my water and gather my rice. So sometimes we get lost, and you see people that have attained a lot of fame, a lot of celebrity, a lot of notoriety, and sometimes we confuse that with leadership. I guess it's sort of leadership as a type, but that's not what it's all about. And remember that no matter who you're looking at, how famous they are, how impressive they might look, they still have to put trousers on one leg at a time too, right?
absolutely.
We're all people, we're all human beings. And that's the thing I think it's worth considering every morning when we wake up and go out and face the day. But to me, no, I'm always waiting for the next disaster, which can be a great challenge and a great
Yeah,
opportunity too, right? Yeah,
absolutely it can. Absolutely.
yeah.
So I'm curious, if you had a dream tonight and ran into the 18-year-old version of you, you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the
Yeah,
wisdom you've accumulated. What
yeah.
advice would you impart?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because again, you triggered another memory. My volunteer passion right now, I work with incarcerated kids. So I actually get exposed to that situation on a regular basis, because when I'm working with somebody who's 17, 18 years old and in that situation, I see myself, which is, it's a great exercise for me and a humbling experience every time I do it. But the biggest thing I try to impart on them is gratitude, and it might sound funny to tell a kid who's locked up to be grateful, but there are a lot of things to be grateful for. I mean, I learned it, and this was embedded, I think, from my mom most of all, because she grew up very hard. We grew up kind of lean.
Yeah.
But when I was a drug addict and living in an old trailer with no heat, self-imposed poverty, but poverty nonetheless, right? Uh, I woke up and started to feel grateful at some point, for what I had. If we can think more about what we have and not worry as much about what we don't have, that's a real good place to start. Because no matter where we're going, right, what we're working with is whatever we have right now,
Yeah.
however abundant or however, impoverished that might feel. So yeah, if I was looking at myself at 18, I would say the same thing I say to kids now. I said, try to consider what you have,
Yeah.
because what you have is pretty remarkable. It's pretty powerful. Whatever you become is going to start right here.
Yeah.
So gratitude.
For sure.
And we've
So
lost that in our society, haven't we, to a
I,
great degree? I mean,
yeah,
God,
we
we're swimming in abundance and we don't even know it.
I know, I know. Yeah, it's an amazing time. I mean, even like medically speaking, the advancements
Mhm.
they've made and everything that we have, like there's a level of being an older guy now that I'm cognizant of not having like a supercomputer in my pocket. I can do whatever I want with this.
You
Like
still look pretty young to me, but anyway.
yeah, I'm trying. I'm doing my best, keeping up with the vitamins, but yeah, it's just amazing that I can do all of these things on this one
Yeah.
device, just little things that are a part of our
Yeah.
world. It's wild. So, of all of these things that you've accomplished in your life up to this point, evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, wow, that's a challenging question. This is cool because, a lot of times we're doing these programs, there's the talking points, right? The packaged questions. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate,
Yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
people having a cool conversation like this. What am I most proud of? I'm gonna think about it this way. Like if I were able, my mom passed a long time ago. If I were able to sit down with her again, and because she was one of the people, uh, even when I was, let's call it a bit more rambunctious in my life, again, she was a person who would stick by me.
Yeah.
And I would hope, like the cops, she picked up the phone before my dad did.
Yeah.
But at any rate, if I had to sit down and talk to her again, her wish for me actually was kind of weird. It was, she wanted me to be a diplomat.
Wow.
She wanted me to go into the diplomatic corps.
Yeah.
And sorry, Mom, let you down on that one. But in a way, I'm fulfilling that because I feel like a lot of my calling in life is to bridge people,
Yeah.
you know, help people, because that's what a leader does, right? Try to transform me into we, if you want to think about it like that. And so I think I'm not, I'll never say I fulfilled that. I'm fulfilling that. That's what I'm working on. But hey, you know what? One of the greatest gifts I ever learned as a martial artist is this little philosophy I'll share with you. Perfection's not a destination. It's a never-ending process, you see.
Yes.
So if I'm engaged in that process, and then I can feel good about myself. But
You know
that's
what?
enough, right?
Yeah.
Let's get back to work.
Well, it's totally true with what you said about the black belt. What a profound
Yeah.
metaphor. Because it can go back to a white belt. I mean, we're all trying to work our way there, you
Oh,
know.
we want to embrace that, right? I mean, that's how boring it is. You've met people that know everything. I'm sure you have, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How much fun is it to be around those guys?
Yeah, I know. I
Right?
know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
We have
good
a
that
name
you're
for that. I won't use it on your program because I don't
right.
know. It's a family show, but we have a name for a person like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we certainly do. We certainly
Yeah.
do. So I got to know, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that knows you. But you
Mhm.
run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Work in progress. That
Yeah.
that one's actually a pretty easy one to address. And I had a rather embarrassing experience last year. It was well intended, I'm sure, by my friends, but on my birthday a couple of years ago, they put me through this exercise where I had to sit and listen to them talk about me and the things that they admired, the things they appreciated about me. And oh God, I was so uncomfortable. I felt so uncomfortable because to me, I kept going, but no, work in progress.
Yeah.
Perfection's not a destination.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to reach out, delve more into your world, any of the good business, where's the best place for them to go?
Thank you for asking that. The easiest thing is the human-centric leader.org. That's kind of the nexus of everything. And I'm going to openly invite people. Lifelong, well, since I've been involved with this, my dream was to create a network to bring people together where leaders, all levels, can get together, talk, have a good conversation, and share resources. And that's called the Keep It Human Network. We just launched that. And you can get to that from the website. So.
Okay. This has been wonderful, Jim. What a refreshing conversation. Thank you, sir, for the work you're doing. Have a great holiday season and a better 25.
Joe, thanks for the platform, man. This was a blast. I
Yeah.
do a lot of these, and people say, "Oh, you say it to no." if I didn't mean it, I'd just say thank you and leave.
Totally.
You're incredible. I really enjoyed this
Thank you.
conversation.
You are too, man. This has been an honor. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And yeah, keep spreading the light. We need it. We need more of you out there for sure.
Likewise.
Thank you.